guys, and welcome back to She Investigates, the podcast where we investigate all things weird. I'm your host, Gwen Ross, and today we're going to explore one of the most infamous cases of insurance fraud in modern British history, the disappearance and faked death of John Darwin. But first, let's catch up. So, I know I've been gone for the last 2 weeks. I was not initially planning to take off the last 2 weeks, but, life happened. And the first big thing that happened was the stomach bug that hit our house. It hit my youngest first, my youngest son. And if you're a parent, you will know that it always happens in the middle of the night, the barfing. It's always at midnight where you have to clean their sheets and get them in the shower. And that's what happened on the Wednesday before 2 weeks ago, before I was supposed to record my podcast. I usually record on Wednesdays, edit that night, and then post it on Thursday morning. So when all of that happened, the podcast kind of went out the window. And then on Sunday, which was Mother's Day, I ended up coming down with it. And it was the weirdest thing because I got up, my cute family made me breakfast for Mother's Day. I ate, I took a shower, I started getting ready for church. And then I just went downhill fast. And by the time that my family left for church, I was just home in bed. And that's where I stayed the rest of the day. I just slept all of Mother's Day. My family went to a little family get together with my side of the family without me because I literally just slept all day. And luckily, we are the only two that really got the stomach bug bad. My husband got it a little bit. My other two kids didn't get it, but so that threw me off a week. And then this past week, it's just end of school year stuff. There's so much stuff that I feel like the school all tries to pack into the last 2 weeks of school. There's field trips and field day and kickball games and just all of the things are packed into the last 2 weeks of school. So that's where I've been for the last 2 weeks. But thank you so much for hanging with me. And to make up for it, this is kind of like a 2-for-1 episode. There's 2 different stories in this one episode. So hopefully that will make up for it. And then next week, I am actually going to be in Dallas because my son's flag football team, you've heard him talk about it on here before, they are going to Dallas for nationals. So our whole family is going. I'm super excited about it. We decided since we were paying for everybody to fly there anyways, we just turn it into our family vacation for this year. So we're doing a lot of fun things in Dallas that I don't feel like we ever would have normally done. It's not a place that I would have ever just picked for us to go on vacation. But I am really excited. We're going to go to the JFK Museum. We're going to go to Six Flags. We're going to go to a science museum. It's going to be really fun. But I will not have an episode next Thursday. So, and then I will get everything worked out for my summer schedule so that there is not a huge break again. But I appreciate you guys being patient with me. I'm just a mom trying to do my best to fit everything in our crazy schedules. The one last thing that I wanted to talk about for Let's Catch Up today is me and my husband watched another really good documentary. It's called A Deadly American Marriage. It's just on Netflix, and it's a new documentary, and it is a crazy story. I don't want to spoil anything for you guys, so without saying too much, it's the story of a man who's murdered by his wife and his wife's father, so his father-in-law. And they claim it was self-defense, and his family says it's not self-defense. And it's another one of those cases like Karen Reed, where I went back and forth about if I thought that it was self-defense or not. But I think for me personally, I've come to the conclusion that I don't think that it was self-defense, but I'd be interested to know what you guys have to say after you have listened to it. So check that one out. And with that, let's jump into today's case. His plan was audacious. The execution was sloppy. And in the end, it was a simple photograph that brought the entire scheme crashing down. John Darwin was born in 1950. He attended St. Francis Xavier's Grammar School, Hartlepool, and De La Salle College, Salford, where he studied biology and chemistry. On the 22nd of December, 1973, Darwin married Anne Stevenson in Blackhall. They had their first son named Mark 2 years later, and then in 1978, they had their second son named Anthony. Darwin taught mathematics at Derwentside for 18 years before leaving to join Barclays Bank. He later became a prison officer at H.M. Prison Home House, and Anne, in the meantime, worked as a receptionist at a medical office. And John, he was the type of person that was always looking for opportunities to strike big and make money. He was on the stock market, he got his sons into the door-to-door sales, and he did cart boot sales, which I had to look that up because that's like a UK term, but basically it's just like a large garage sale. They even at one point tried breeding snails for escargot. This guy was willing to try anything to make a quick buck. By the early 2000s, he and his wife Anne lived in Hartlepool, England, and outwardly they seemed like a typical middle-class couple. Darwin and his wife also ran a business renting bedsits in County Durham with 12 houses. Bedsits is another one of those UK terms that I looked up, and it's basically just like renting a bedroom as opposed to renting an entire unit. So you share the kitchen facilities and you share a bathroom, but you have your own bedroom. So they had 12 of these houses that they were renting out, like basically rooms to people. But they ran into debt after purchasing 2 houses in Seaton, Carew in December 2000. They made some poor financial decisions, and with the collapse of the housing market, they were left owing large sums of money. They were pretty much drowning in debt, and they weren't even making enough money to cover the monthly mortgages on all 14 of these properties, which 14 properties, I cannot even imagine. Like, you think about today how much one property costs. I mean, I know we're talking about the 70s here, but still, they had accrued over $700,000 in debt, and one of their properties was even threatening foreclosure. They were basically on the brink of bankruptcy. So, faced with these mounting debts and the looming threat of bankruptcy, John hatched a plan. On March 21st, 2000, John Darwin told his wife that he was going canoeing near Seaton, Carew on the northeast coast. John and Anne's neighbor, Howie Russin, saw John take the canoe out, and he said that it was a particularly calm day out on the water. John was an extremely experienced canoeer, and he'd even built his own canoe. So this was a regular hobby of his, something that he did frequently. But today would be anything but ordinary. He was only supposed to be gone a few hours, but when he didn't show up for work later that day, his family began to worry. Anne immediately called the police, and the search for John began. They searched 62 square miles, and the cost of that search was £150,000, but they found no sign of John. The search and rescue effort was swift and extensive, and at 1:15 a.m. the next day, his paddle and parts of his red canoe surfaced, and it appeared that his canoe had been wrecked. They were in bad shape. So the assumption was pretty clear. John Darwin had drowned at sea. The search then got scaled way back, but the police were confused how somebody could have had problems out on the lake that would have resulted in this wrecked canoe on such a calm day. They thought maybe he had accidentally gone into like a shipping lane and been sucked up by the propeller of another boat. And that was really the only explanation that they could think of that made any sense. The police and the family made a public plea for anyone that saw anything or knew anything to come forward immediately. But nobody came forward. So John's older son, Mark, came home from London upon hearing the news. But their youngest son, get this, he was on a trip to Canada where he had actually been planning to propose to his girlfriend. So it took him longer to get home. I mean, talk about bad timing. Just weeks later, an inquest was held and a coroner legally declared him dead. Friends and neighbors mourned John's death. Anne, Mark, and Anthony held a memorial service for John, and Anne seemed devastated by his disappearance and death. In 2003, Anne Darwin received life insurance payouts, his work pension, and mortgage insurance settlements totaling hundreds of thousands of pounds. But the actual truth of what happened was far stranger. In November of 2007, so this is 4 years later now, John Darwin unexpectedly walked into a London police station claiming he had amnesia and had no recollection of the past 5 years. So the police call Anne, who was just ecstatic that John had seemingly risen from the dead. And at first, the story made headlines because it was this miraculous reappearance. But as the media and the police started hearing more and more bits and pieces of the story, they started getting suspicious. The Cleveland police were also notified by the London police because they were the station where John had originally been reported missing. And the Cleveland police told the London police that 4 months earlier, they had actually received tips that John might be alive. One of Anne's colleagues had called the police after he thought he heard Anne on the phone with John. Remember, she was a receptionist at a doctor's office. And how brazen is that, if that's true, to be making phone calls to your quote-unquote dead husband while you're at work where anybody could hear? Another colleague of John's contacted the police to tell him that he thought that he had seen John, but he couldn't be certain. So that lead didn't ever really lead to anything. The police never really followed up on it, but obviously this guy was sure enough that he had seen John to make a call to the police department and not just write it off as someone that looked similar. So in my opinion, that was kind of a ball that was dropped by the police. Because of all of the attention that the case had gotten, the police and the media both started digging deeper into this story and trying to figure out where John had actually been for these past 5 years. As I mentioned, the couple was drowning in debt and they didn't want to file bankruptcy. It was kind of like a pride thing for John. He didn't want to be the guy that failed. And that's why they came up with this plan. It involved faking his own death. And on the day that John's canoe disappeared, he paddled far enough out that he was out of sight of anyone. Then he went and waited at the first pier south of Seton Karoo until 7 p.m. when Anne came and picked him up and took him home. John hadn't drowned. He was alive and living in a secret room hidden behind a false wall in the couple's home. Let me explain. The couple actually owned the home right next door to the home that they'd been living in when John disappeared. And there was a cupboard in that home that the couple had converted into a passageway between the two homes that connected 2 bedrooms. So John could essentially crawl through the passageway and be directly in Anne's bedroom without ever having to leave that second property. So for years, he remained in hiding, just going between these 2 properties. And when the risk of discovery grew too high, John would sometimes live in the neighboring property the Darwins owned. The police hadn't noticed that passageway when they were doing their initial searches when John first went missing. He even ventured out occasionally, sometimes disguised with a fake beard and under the cover of darkness. Several witnesses later claimed that they had seen him, but the sightings had all been dismissed. The Darwins even fooled their own sons, who believed that their father had truly died, which is just so messed up. Like, not only did John fake his own death, he completely ruined Anthony's trip to propose to his girlfriend, which is super rude. And then he forced his sons to grieve him when all along he was alive and well. Could he not have at least waited until Anthony got back from his trip? Like, come on. That's basic common courtesy when it comes to faking your own death. Am I right? The boys also unknowingly helped with the whole scheme. They actually helped their mom set up offshore bank accounts after John had passed away because she didn't know how to do it. They didn't know that they were helping with this whole elaborate scheme that his mom and dad had set up to obtain money from the life insurance. By 2006, John was growing restless. He was going stir crazy. I mean, there's only so much that you can do when you can't risk going outside. He was tired of hiding 24/7, but he knew that he could never come out of hiding while the couple remained at their current house. So the Darwins decided to start a new life abroad. This way, John could live his life without fear of being recognized. And they chose Panama, where they planned to invest in property again like they had done in the UK. And the first step was to get a false identity for John. He thought that the best idea was to assume the identity of a dead baby. So he would go to the library in disguise with a hat, a popped-up collar, and a fake limp. And this is the part in the story where I'm getting like major John Raffio vibes from Parks and Rec. You know, when he fakes his own death for insurance and at his funeral, he's watching everybody at the gravesite and they sing, "Don't be suspicious, don't be suspicious." That is what I'm picturing right here. Or I'm picturing him like wearing those black glasses with like the fake giant nose, like just ridiculous. So he would go to the library and go through death records, and he decided to pose as John Jones, who was a baby that had been born the same year as him and passed away at just 5 weeks old. So they traveled to Panama under false identities using fake passports. And at that point in time, in order to get a passport in the UK, you needed somebody in good public standing in the community to sign for you on your passport application. I don't know if that's still the case or not because I'm in the US. But at this point in time, that was something that you needed. And so the librarian at the library John had befriended her when he had been doing all of his research looking for a new identity to steal. And she was actually the one that signed for him. He even still put his real address, the house where he had lived with Anne and that he had been hiding in for all these years. Why are criminals so stupid? Sometimes I swear it's like they just want to get caught. After all that he had done to try to disguise himself and his identity, he puts his own address. Anyways, they purchased land and even appeared in a photo with a Panamanian real estate agent. I probably said that wrong. Panamanian? Hopefully that's right. A British newspaper quickly unearthed the image of John and Anne in Panama, taken just a year earlier, and it proved that not only was John alive and well during his supposed missing years, but Anne had actively participated in the fraud. So confronted with all of this evidence, the Darwin's elaborate deception just unraveled in a matter of days. John and Anne Darwin were arrested and charged with fraud. And in 2008, John was sentenced to 6 years, 3 months in prison, and Anne received 6 years and 6 months. I don't know why she got a little bit longer. She got 3 extra months. I'm not sure what that was for. But their sons were devastated by the betrayal, and they actually publicly disowned their parents. Good for them. The case became a media sensation in the UK and abroad, not only because of the sheer audacity of the plot, but because it revealed how easily trust, even between family members, could be exploited for financial gain. They were willing to just give it all up in order to not have to claim bankruptcy and lose what they had built. In later years, John and Anne both expressed regret. They served their prison terms, divorced, and moved on with their separate lives. As if this story is not crazy enough on its own, it seems that years later, someone else thought that it would be a good idea to fake their own death in a very similar way. And we're talking 2024, people. This was very recent. In August of 2024, Ryan Borgwardts was living in Wisconsin with his wife, Emily, and their 3 children. On August 11th, 2024, they all went to church together, and then Ryan decided in the afternoon to go kayaking and fishing for a few hours in Green Lake, Wisconsin. But it gets later and later, and Ryan still isn't back. So, fearing the worst, his wife reported him missing, and a search got underway. The Green Lake County deputies headed to the lake, and they found his car and his trailer, but no Ryan. An hour later, they found Ryan's kayak floating capsized on the lake. After this discovery, the search only intensified, including a nonprofit called Bruce's Legacy. They help aid in search and recovery of drowning victims. Later that morning, 2 fishermen caught a fishing rod in one of their nets that actually belonged to Ryan Borgwardts. Later that day, somebody else found a tackle box that had a driver's license, wallet, and keys that also all belonged to Ryan. So, thinking that he must have fallen into the water, the search dragged on for 54 days. They were not willing to just let this go. Even if he had drowned, they were sparing no expense just to find his body and give his family some peace. Cadaver dogs and dive teams were brought in. Keith, with Bruce's Legacy, was particularly invested. He actually spent around $10,000 in repairs and equipment, as well as spending 23 days of his life searching for Ryan. And doubt started to set in that Ryan was even in the water. They felt like they had exhausted every option that they had, and he was still nowhere to be found in the water. So finally, on October 7th, they decided to change their search tactics. They ran his name to see if his passport had been used, and ding, 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 it had. On October 13th, just a day after he was reported missing, his passport had been used at the Canadian border. So now they're looking not for a body in a lake, but a living man who had faked his own death. But where could they even start to try to find him? So they started going through his online presence in the months leading up to his disappearance. And what they found was startling. He had been planning this for months. He had replaced the hard drive on his laptop, gotten a second passport after reporting his as stolen, cleared his browser history on the day he disappeared, synced his laptop up to the cloud, inquired about moving funds to a foreign bank account, changed his email address associated with financial accounts, purchased a new $375,000 life insurance policy, bought an airline gift card, and had been communicating with a woman who is believed to be in Uzbekistan. It looked like he had faked his own death to be with this woman that he was communicating with, but they still didn't really have any idea where he was. Now, what kind of trash human do you have to be to not only leave your wife and kids for another woman, but to also make them suffer through thinking that you drowned and go through this whole 54-day search, to go through the whole process of searching for him? The insurance policy makes me think that he must have at least had a little bit of guilt and knew that what he was doing was wrong, because the money from that policy obviously wouldn't have gone to him if he was quote unquote dead. It would have gone to his wife. So maybe he thought by at least providing them by some type of like financial stability after he left, that would make it a little bit more okay, which it doesn't. But maybe that was his way of thinking. So the biggest question people were asking now was, had he actually broken any laws? It's not technically illegal to fake your own death. So what charges would he be facing? Possibly obstructing justice and potentially insurance fraud. But at this point, they still weren't even 100% sure where Ryan was. They speculated that he was in Uzbekistan, but the U.S. doesn't have an extradition treaty with Uzbekistan. Somehow, and it wasn't really super clear in all of my research, the police were able to locate him, and he was in the country of Georgia with the woman that he'd been talking to online, and they'd been staying in a hotel room together. But at this point, it was entirely up to him if he came back or not. So the police began appealing to his heartstrings, telling him what his family had been through while he was gone and encouraging him to come home and make things right. They also asked him to provide a video of himself to prove that he was safe. He finally makes the decision to come home on December 10th, and he told investigators exactly how he pulled off this elaborate plan. He hid an e-bike near the boat launch, paddled his kayak and a child-sized inflatable boat to the middle of the lake. He then overturned the kayak and dumped his phone in the lake. He paddled the inflatable boat to shore, got on the e-bike, and rode through the night to Madison, Wisconsin. In Madison, he got on a bus and went to Detroit and then the Canadian border. He continued on the bus to an airport and got on a plane. He didn't think that the search for him would last longer than 2 weeks. He was then booked into Green Lake County Jail on a misdemeanor charge of obstructing justice. He appeared in court the next day and told the judge that he would be representing himself, as he only had $20 in his wallet and he couldn't afford an attorney. Despite being offered a court-appointed attorney, he still decided that he could do it on his own. He was given a $500 signature bond, and that's a type of bail bond that allows someone to get out of jail without actually paying the bond. His passport wasn't even confiscated. Ryan said that he researched other individuals that disappeared. He looked up lake deaths, travel, how to take money to other countries. So that got me thinking, I wonder, is it possible that he came across Darwin's case? I mean, maybe. We won't really know for sure. But if he did, you would think that that would serve as more of like a cautionary tale than like blueprints for him to follow. But like I said, criminals are stupid. He pled not guilty, and he's facing a $10,000 fine and up to 9 months in jail if he's found guilty. There still doesn't seem to be a court date set, and so right now he's out of jail, living life until a decision is made. But his wife has filed for divorce. Good for her. She deserves better. And it sounds like he was just looking for a fairy tale, and the grass was greener on the other side of the world until it wasn't. So I guess what we've learned from our stories today is that if you're going to fake your own death, don't go the drowning route. It doesn't end well. In all seriousness, I do feel bad for both of these men's children and Ryan's wife, because they are the true victims in these stories. The selfishness of putting your own family through grieving you just so you can skip off to greener pastures is just beyond me. And that's it for today's case. Like I said, I will be gone next week. I will be in Dallas, but after that, I will be back with an all-new episode. If you enjoy this podcast, if you wouldn't mind giving me a 5-star review or subscribing on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Till then, I'll keep snooping so you don't have to. This is She Investigates, signing off.